Professor Velthara stepped into the massive lecture hall, her crystalline body catching the soft blue light that filled the room. Hundreds of alien students from across the galaxy sat in curved rows, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had tentacles that moved like ocean waves, others had multiple eyes that blinked in patterns, and a few glowed softly in the dim light. The excitement in the room was thick like fog. Students whispered to each other in dozens of different languages, their voices creating a musical hum that echoed off the high ceiling. Today was special. Today they would learn about the most dangerous things in the universe. "Welcome, young scholars," Professor Velthara said, her voice traveling through tiny devices that made her words clear to every species in the room. "Today we study death itself. Not the death that comes from war or accident, but death that hides in tiny molecules smaller than the eye can see." A young student named Kixtel sat in the front row, her 3 purple eyes wide with interest. She came from a planet where even touching the wrong plant could kill her entire family. Next to her sat Zimkar, whose green scales changed color when he felt excited or scared. Behind them, student Vexnali tapped her long fingers on her desk, making soft clicking sounds that meant she was thinking hard. The professor moved her hand, and suddenly the air above her head filled with glowing letters and numbers. A long list appeared, floating in space like magic. The students gasped and pointed at what they saw. The list seemed to go on forever. "Behold," Professor Velthara announced, "the universal list of biological toxins. These are the most deadly substances known to science. Each one can kill or cause terrible pain to almost every living thing we have discovered in our travels across the stars." The list began to scroll slowly through the air. Strange names appeared and disappeared: capsaicin, ethanol, caffeine, theobramine, nicotine, solanin. Each name glowed red like danger signs, and next to each name were numbers that showed how much could kill different types of life. Kixtel raised one of her 4 arms. "Professor, what makes these substances so terrible?" "An excellent question," the professor replied, her crystal body brightening with approval. "These molecules are like tiny soldiers designed by nature to cause maximum suffering. Take capsaicin, for example." She pointed at the name on the list, and it grew larger and brighter. "This compound attacks the nervous system directly. For your species, Kixtel, even a single grain would cause your nerve endings to burn like fire for many hours." Several students made sounds of fear and disgust. One student from the outer rim actually turned a pale yellow color, which meant he felt sick just thinking about it. "Ethanol is even worse," Professor Velthara continued. "This liquid dissolves the walls of living cells. It turns solid tissue into liquid soup. Most species die within minutes of consuming even small amounts." Zimkar's scales turned from green to deep purple with worry. "Professor, how do these evil substances even exist? Why would nature create such horrible things?" The professor smiled, though her crystalline face made it hard to see. "Nature is not kind, young Zimkar. Every plant and animal must fight to survive. These toxins are weapons in a war that has lasted millions of years. Plants create poison to stop animals from eating them. Animals create poison to stop other animals from eating them. It is survival of the most deadly." The list continued to float above them, each name more frightening than the last. Students scribbled notes frantically, trying to remember every detail. Some drew pictures of molecular structures, others wrote long descriptions of what each toxin could do to their particular body type. "Caffeine destroys the brain functions of most silicon-based life forms," Professor Velthara explained as that name glowed bright red. "Theobramine causes heart failure in species with multiple circulatory systems. Nicotine shuts down breathing in almost everyone." A student named Trixval, who looked like a walking tree with many small faces on her branches, asked nervously, "Professor, are there any living things that can survive contact with these toxins?" "A wonderful question," the professor said, making the list stop moving. "The answer is yes, but very few. Some bacteria can resist 1 or 2 of these compounds. A few plants have built defenses against specific toxins. But no complex life form, no intelligent species, no civilization we have ever encountered can survive exposure to more than 1 or 2 of these substances." The room fell completely silent. Even the soft humming sounds that some students made when they breathed seemed to stop. The weight of what they were learning pressed down on them like heavy blankets. "This is why these substances are banned from most civilized worlds," Professor Velthara continued. "Possessing them is considered an act of war. Using them against another species is the worst crime imaginable. The Galactic Council has laws that make even researching these compounds illegal without special permission." She waved her hand again, and the list slowly faded away like morning mist. Your assignment is to choose 5 toxins from this list and write detailed reports about their effects on 3 different species types. But remember, this knowledge comes with great responsibility. You are learning about the power to end life itself. As students began packing their belongings and preparing to leave, Professor Velthara made one final announcement. Next week, we will have special guests at our university. The first humans to participate in our exchange program will arrive. They are said to be a fascinating species, though quite fragile compared to most of us. The students chatted excitedly as they left the lecture hall, their minds full of deadly knowledge and curiosity about these mysterious humans who were coming to visit their world. The great transport ship landed on Platform 7 with a gentle thud that shook the ground beneath hundreds of waiting aliens. Purple smoke rose from the landing engines as they cooled down, and a long metal walkway extended from the ship's belly to touch the platform. Students and teachers from dozens of worlds had gathered to see something that had never happened before in the history of their university. Administrator ZYX Hal floated above the crowd, her body like a jellyfish made of rainbow colors that changed with her emotions. Right now she glowed bright yellow with excitement and nervousness. Her tentacles moved in quick circles as she spoke into a small device that made her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Today marks a new chapter in galactic education, she announced, her voice carrying across the landing platform. For the first time, we welcome beings from the planet Earth to share their knowledge with us. The crowd pressed closer to the walkway. Students whispered to each other in their various languages, creating a sound like wind blowing through different types of trees. Some had never seen humans before and did not know what to expect. Others had heard stories but thought they might be made up. Kixtel stood near the front with her classmates from Professor Velthara's xenobiology class. Her 3 purple eyes were fixed on the ship's doorway, waiting to see these mysterious creatures. Next to her, Zimkar's scales had turned a curious shade of blue-green, and his tongue flicked out to taste the air for new smells. I heard they only have 2 eyes, whispered student Vexnali, her long fingers drumming against her side with excitement. And they walk on only 2 legs like some kind of strange birds. My cousin saw pictures, added another student. They have no scales, no fur, no shell. Just pink skin like baby creatures. The ship's door opened with a soft hissing sound, and steam poured out. 3 figures appeared in the doorway, and the entire crowd fell silent. The humans looked nothing like what most aliens expected and everything like what others had imagined. Dr. William Harris stepped out first, his brown hair moving slightly in the alien breeze. He wore simple clothes and carried a small bag over his shoulder. His face showed calm interest as he looked out at the sea of alien forms watching him. Behind him came Professor Emma Clark, her red hair bright under the platform lights, and then graduate student Thomas Baker, young and eager, his eyes wide as he took in the amazing sight of so many different species in one place. Welcome to Kepler University, Administrator ZYX Hal called out, floating down toward them. Her tentacles curled in what humans had been taught was a friendly greeting. We are honored to have you here. Dr. Harris smiled, showing white teeth that many aliens found both fascinating and slightly frightening. Thank you for having us. We're excited to be part of this historic exchange. The humans walked down the platform, and aliens stepped back to make room, not from fear but from curiosity and respect. Many had never seen bipedal creatures that moved so smoothly without tails or extra arms for balance. Your journey was comfortable? Asked Professor Velthara, who had come to greet the visitors personally. Her crystalline body reflected the platform lights in rainbow patterns. Very comfortable, thank you, Professor Clark replied. Though we're quite hungry after the long trip. I hope that's not rude to mention. Not at all, Administrator ZYX Hal said, her colors shifting to warm orange with pleasure. We have prepared a welcome meal in the main faculty dining hall. Our food synthesizers have been programmed with what our research suggests are safe nutritional requirements for your species. Thomas Baker looked around at all the alien faces watching them and grinned. This is incredible. I never imagined I'd see so many different types of intelligent life in one place. We have students from over 200 different worlds, Professor Velthara explained as they began walking toward the main university buildings. Your presence brings that number to 201. The group moved through corridors lined with curious students who peeked out of doorways and around corners to catch glimpses of the humans. Some took pictures with devices that looked like floating crystals, while others simply stared with whatever types of eyes they possessed. I hope you don't mind the attention, Administrator ZYX Hal said, noticing how many aliens were following them at a respectful distance. Your species has become quite famous since we established contact. Many of our students have written research papers about human culture and biology. Dr. Harris chuckled, a sound that many aliens found strange but pleasant. We're used to being studied. Humans are naturally curious about everything, so we understand the feeling. As they entered the dining hall, the xenobiology students who had been following them found seats at nearby tables. They pretended to eat their own meals but kept their eyes fixed on the humans. Professor Velthara had specifically asked them to observe these visitors as closely as possible for educational purposes. We brought a few items from Earth, Professor Clark said, setting her bag on the table. Small things to supplement whatever you've prepared. We hope that's acceptable. Of course, Administrator ZYXHAL replied, her tentacles waving with approval. We are always interested in learning about the dietary preferences of different species. The humans began unpacking their personal items, and the watching students leaned forward with intense scientific curiosity. None of them knew they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of biology forever. Dr. Harris pulled out a small metal container and opened it, releasing a dark, rich smell into the air. Several aliens nearby made sounds of surprise at the strong scent. Coffee, he explained simply, beginning to prepare his drink. Can't start the day without it. The alien students watched with growing interest as the humans continued unpacking their meal supplements, completely unaware that they were about to consume enough biological warfare agents to theoretically level a small moon. Kixtel's datapad fell from her 3 hands and hit the floor with a loud crash that echoed through the dining hall. The sound made several nearby aliens turn to look at her, but she did not notice. Her 3 purple eyes were locked on Dr. Harris, watching in complete horror as he lifted a steaming cup to his lips and took a long, satisfied drink. No, 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 she whispered, her voice shaking like leaves in a storm. He cannot be doing that. It is impossible. Zimkar leaned closer to her, his green scales turning yellow with confusion. What is wrong, Kixtel? What do you see? She pointed at Dr. Harris with a trembling finger. Look at what he is drinking. Look at the color, smell the scent in the air. That is pure caffeine extract. I am sure of it. The color drained from Zimkar's scales until they were almost white. He pulled out his own datapad and quickly scrolled through the list they had studied just days before. Caffeine, he read quietly. Deadly to 93% of known species. Causes immediate nervous system failure. Even tiny amounts can stop the heart. But Dr. Harris was not dying. In fact, he looked happier after drinking the deadly liquid. He smiled and made a soft sound of pleasure, then took another large sip. His eyes closed with what could only be described as joy. Professor Velthara, Kixtel called out, her voice high with panic. Professor, you must see this. The crystalline professor turned from her conversation with the university administrators and glided over to the student tables. What seems to be the problem, Kixtel? The human is poisoning himself, she said, pointing again at Dr. Harris. He is drinking caffeine like it is water. Professor Velthara's crystal body flickered with disbelief. She looked at the human, then at her student's datapad showing the toxin list, then back at the human. Dr. Harris waved at them in a friendly way and took another drink. Perhaps he does not know, Professor Velthara said slowly. Perhaps his species has not learned about these dangers yet. But then something even more terrible happened. Professor Clark reached into her bag and pulled out a small red bottle. She shook it gently, and the students could hear liquid moving inside. She unscrewed the cap, and immediately a sharp, burning smell filled the air. Hot sauce, she said cheerfully to Administrator ZYXHAL. I never eat without it. She turned the bottle upside down and poured the red liquid all over her food. Steam rose from her plate like smoke from a fire. The smell was so strong that several aliens at nearby tables began to cough and move away. Student Vexnali grabbed her friend's arm. That is capsaicin, she gasped. Pure concentrated capsaicin. She is putting it directly on her food. The alien students watched in stunned silence as Professor Clark took a large bite of her capsaicin-covered meal. Her face turned slightly red, and she made small puffing sounds with her mouth. But instead of screaming in agony or falling to the floor in pain, she smiled with obvious pleasure. Delicious, she said. Just the right amount of heat. Thomas Baker, meanwhile, had unwrapped something from his bag that made the situation even worse. It was dark brown and rectangular, and when he broke off a piece, the rich smell told every alien in the room exactly what it was. Chocolate, he said happily, popping the piece into his mouth. 85% cacao. The bitter the better. Theobramine. One of the most deadly alkaloids on their list. The young human was eating it like candy, and he looked like he was enjoying every bite. The xenobiology students sat frozen in their chairs, watching three humans consume enough biological weapons to kill everyone in the dining hall several times over. Yet the humans seemed perfectly fine. More than fine, they seemed happy. Dr. Harris finished his cup of liquid death and immediately began preparing another one. Professor Clark asked if anyone wanted to try her capsaicin sauce, holding up the bottle like it was a gift instead of a weapon of mass destruction. Thomas Baker offered pieces of his thebromine bar to nearby aliens, who recoiled in terror. "This cannot be real," whispered Zimcar. "We are having a shared nightmare. Humans cannot survive these substances. Nothing can survive these substances." But the evidence was right in front of them. Not only were the humans surviving, they were actively seeking out more of these deadly compounds. Dr. Harris asked if the university had any stronger coffee. Professor Clark mentioned that she had brought several different types of hot sauce and wondered if any aliens would like to try them. Thomas Baker pulled out another chocolate bar, this one even darker than the first. Professor Velthara's crystal body had gone completely clear, which happened only when she was in a state of total shock. She pulled out her communication device and sent an urgent message to the university's medical center. "Emergency consultation needed in faculty dining hall," she typed. "Possible mass poisoning event in progress. 3 beings consuming multiple Class A biological toxins simultaneously. Subjects show no signs of distress. Please advise." The response came back immediately. "Are you certain about the toxin identification? No known species can survive exposure to multiple Class A compounds." Professor Velthara looked back at the humans, who were now discussing the different flavors of deadly substances they enjoyed consuming. Dr. Harris was explaining the difference between various types of coffee beans, each one more toxic than the last. Professor Clark was describing something called ghost peppers that made her current capsaicin sauce seem mild by comparison. "I am certain," she typed back. "We may have discovered something that changes everything we know about biology." The impossible had become routine. The humans finished their meal of concentrated death and thanked their hosts politely. They seemed refreshed and energized rather than deceased. The alien students remained in their seats long after the humans left, staring at the empty table and trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Everything they had learned about life and death had just been turned upside down by 3 beings who treated universal toxins like everyday food. The xenobiology laboratory had transformed overnight into something that looked like a war room. Professor Velthara stood in the center, surrounded by floating screens that showed charts, graphs, and surveillance footage of the 3 humans. Her crystal body pulsed with different colors as she processed the impossible data her students had collected. "Day 7 of human observation," announced student Kixtel, her 3 eyes red from staying awake too long. "Subject Harris has consumed caffeine solutions 12 times today. Each serving contained enough toxins to kill a Vorthian battlecruiser crew." She pointed at a screen showing Dr. Harris in his temporary quarters, calmly sipping from a large cup while reading a book about galactic history. He looked relaxed and comfortable, not like someone who had been poisoning himself for a week straight. "Subject Clark's capsaicin consumption has actually increased," reported Zimcar, his scales now permanently stuck on a worried shade of gray. "Yesterday she complained that our strongest varieties were too mild. She asked if we had anything spicier." The assembled students made sounds of disbelief and fear. Professor Clark had consumed enough capsaicin to dissolve the nervous systems of entire planets, yet she wanted more. She had even asked Administrator ZYXHAL if the university grew any of what she called really hot peppers. Student Vexnali raised her hand, her long fingers shaking slightly. "Professor, we have discovered something else. The humans brought cultural data files with them. I have been studying their entertainment and information networks." She activated a new screen that showed images from Earth. The other students gasped and pointed at what they saw. Massive buildings filled with rows and rows of coffee-making equipment. Entire factories dedicated to producing chocolate in thousands of different varieties. Warehouses full of bottles containing various levels of capsaicin-based sauces. "These are not emergency survival foods," Vexnali continued, her voice growing higher with amazement. "These substances form the foundation of human civilization. They have entire economic systems built around producing and consuming biological weapons." The screen changed to show something called a coffee shop where hundreds of humans stood in long lines, waiting to purchase liquid caffeine. They looked happy and excited, not like people preparing to commit suicide. "Look at this," she said, pointing to another image. "They call this a chocolate factory. It produces thousands of tons of concentrated thebromine every day. And here," She gestured to a third image. This is something called a hot sauce festival where humans compete to consume the most concentrated capsaicin. Professor Velthara's crystal body turned completely transparent, which only happened when she encountered something that broke her understanding of reality. They compete? They turn consuming toxins into games. It gets worse, Kixtel said quietly. She activated another screen showing human cultural data. They have social gatherings called bars where they consume ethanol in groups. They sing songs about it. They celebrate special occasions by drinking more of it. The screen showed humans laughing and talking while consuming what should have been industrial solvent. Some of them were drinking ethanol mixed with other toxic substances, creating cocktails that could theoretically melt through starship hulls. Zimkar pointed to his data pad with a trembling claw. I have been tracking their consumption patterns. Subject Baker ate chocolate 17 times yesterday. 17 times. Each piece contained enough theobramine to stop the hearts of my entire family. And he shared it with other humans, added another student. They gave each other poison as gifts. As expressions of friendship and love. Professor Velthara began pacing back and forth, her crystal feet clicking on the laboratory floor. This defies every law of biology we know. How does an entire species not only survive constant exposure to universal toxins but build their society around consuming them? Student Trixval, whose tree-like body had been drooping with worry for days, spoke up in her whispered voice. Professor, I have been researching human evolutionary history. I think I have found something important. She activated a screen showing Earth from space, then zoomed in to show the planet's surface. Earth is not like other worlds. It is a planet at war with itself. Look at these life forms. The screen filled with images of Earth's plants and animals. Poisonous snakes that could kill with a single bite. Plants covered in toxic spines. Mushrooms that looked harmless but contained deadly chemicals. Fish that produced enough poison to kill thousands of predators. Everything on their planet is trying to kill everything else, Trixval continued. For millions of years, humans had to eat whatever they could find or they would starve. They could not be picky. They had to learn to survive on poison or die. The laboratory fell silent as the students processed this information. Slowly, the pieces began to fit together like a puzzle made of nightmares. So they adapted, Professor Velthara said slowly. Over millions of years, they turned their planet's biological warfare into food. Not just food, Kixtel corrected. Look at their cultural data. They use these substances for energy, for medicine, for social bonding, for pleasure. Caffeine keeps them awake and alert. Capsaicin makes them feel strong and brave. Ethanol helps them relax and connect with others. They have turned universal toxins into tools for improving their lives. Dr. Harris appeared on their surveillance screen, preparing his evening meal. He was combining caffeine, capsaicin, and several other compounds they had not even identified yet. He hummed a happy tune while creating what should have been a weapon of mass destruction. We are not watching humans consume poison, Professor Velthara realized, her crystal body brightening with sudden understanding. We are watching the most successful predator species in the galaxy. They eat everything that tries to kill them. The investigation had revealed something that would change how aliens viewed humans forever. These were not weak, fragile beings who had somehow stumbled into space travel. These were creatures who had survived by turning their planet's deadliest weapons into daily bread. And they were just getting started. The faculty dining hall had never seen anything like this before. Every table was filled with alien students, professors, and administrators, all staring nervously at the special stage that had been set up in the center of the room. Medical equipment lined the walls like silent guardians, ready to save lives if the evening went wrong. Emergency medical teams from 12 different species stood ready with antidotes, healing crystals, and emergency transport pods. Professor Velthara stood at the edge of the crowd, her crystal body flickering between colors of excitement and terror. After 2 weeks of investigation, she had convinced the university to allow this unprecedented demonstration. The 3 humans had agreed to show their alien colleagues what they called a typical Earth dinner party. Dr. Harris stood behind a preparation table that looked more like a chemistry laboratory than a kitchen. Bottles, jars, and containers filled with deadly substances covered every inch of the surface. He smiled warmly at the crowd of hundreds of aliens who watched him with the fascination usually reserved for watching extremely dangerous experiments. "Good evening, everyone," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's translation system. "We thought tonight would be a perfect opportunity to share some of our favorite foods from home." Student Kixtel sat in the front row with her classmates, medical monitoring devices attached to her body in case she fainted from fear. Her 3 eyes were fixed on Dr. Harris's hands as he reached for a container filled with dark powder. "We'll start with something simple," Dr. Harris continued, opening the container. A rich, bitter smell filled the air, and several aliens in the back rows immediately began coughing. "This is coffee. We grind up beans from a plant that evolved this chemical to kill insects that tried to eat it." He poured hot water over the deadly powder, creating a dark liquid that steamed like a witch's potion. The medical scanners around the room began beeping as they detected concentrated caffeine in the air. Professor Clark joined him at the table, carrying an armload of bottles that made the alien medical teams grip their equipment tighter. "While William prepares our beverages, I'll start on the main course," she announced cheerfully. She opened a bottle filled with red liquid that was so concentrated it looked like liquid fire. The smell hit the crowd like a physical force, and aliens in the first 3 rows began backing away from the stage. "This is what we call ghost pepper sauce," Professor Clark explained, completely ignoring the panic spreading through the audience. "It measures about 1 million Scoville units. That's a way we measure how much capsaicin is in our food." Administrator ZYX Hal, floating safely at the back of the room, sent an urgent message to the medical teams. "Subjects are handling Class A biological weapons without protective gear. Prepare for mass casualty event." But Thomas Baker just laughed and pulled out his contribution to the meal. "Emma's sauce is pretty mild," he said, unwrapping several dark bars that made the room's toxin detectors scream warnings. "Wait until you see dessert." He broke off a piece of chocolate so dark it seemed to absorb light from the room. "This is 95% cacao. Pure concentrated theobramine. It's bitter enough to make most humans cry, but that's how I like it." The 3 humans began preparing their meal with the casual confidence of people making everyday food, not handling enough biological weapons to sterilize a small moon. Dr. Harris added extra scoops of coffee powder to his cup. Professor Clark poured her capsaicin sauce over everything on her plate until it looked like lava. Thomas Baker broke his chocolate into large pieces that would have killed most aliens just from the smell. "The secret," Dr. Harris said, lifting his cup of liquid death, "is that these substances don't just keep us alive. They make us feel good." He took a long drink of his caffeine solution, and his whole face brightened with pleasure. "Coffee wakes up our minds and helps us think clearly. It gives us energy to work and creates social moments with friends." Professor Clark took a large bite of her capsaicin-covered food, and her face turned red as her body reacted to the chemical assault. But instead of screaming or collapsing, she smiled with obvious joy. "Spicy food makes us feel alive," she explained, her voice slightly breathless from the capsaicin. "It triggers our body's natural defenses, which creates feelings of excitement and happiness. Plus, it just tastes incredible." Thomas Baker popped an entire piece of chocolate into his mouth, enough theobramine to stop the hearts of everyone in the front row. He chewed thoughtfully, savoring the bitter compounds that should have been killing him. "Chocolate contains chemicals that make our brains produce happy feelings," he said. "It's like edible joy. We give it to people we love because it makes them feel good." The alien audience sat in stunned silence, watching 3 humans consume enough toxins to wage biological warfare against entire star systems. But the humans were not just surviving. They were thriving. They were happy. They were sharing their deadly meal like it was a celebration. Professor Velthara finally understood. "You turned your planet's weapons against you into pleasure?" Dr. Harris nodded, preparing another cup of his caffeine solution. "Evolution gave us 2 choices. Die from the toxins, or learn to love them. We chose love. Every substance that tried to kill us became part of our culture," Professor Clark added, reaching for a bottle of even spicier sauce. "We didn't just adapt to survive. We adapted to enjoy the challenge." Thomas Baker offered pieces of his chocolate to the nearest aliens, who recoiled in terror. "Want to try some? It's really good once you get used to it." The evening ended with the humans enjoying their meal of concentrated death while hundreds of aliens watched in amazement and fear. Medical teams that had prepared for mass casualties instead found themselves documenting the impossible. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Professor Velthara made an announcement that would change xenobiology forever. "Tomorrow we begin rewriting our textbooks. Humans have taught us that life finds a way not just to survive, but to find joy in the most unlikely places." The lesson was clear to everyone present. Never underestimate a species that had spent millions of years turning everything that tried to kill them into their favorite foods. They were not just survivors. They were conquerors who had won their war against death by learning to laugh at it and invite it to dinner.